to you, and that's my cue to get started. Um, Thank you, folks, for joining this evening or afternoon from where you're calling in from. I would just ask that if you just joined, please, you can mute yourself. We have an action pack hour and a half ahead of us today. But just to start, we're gathering here today for the webinar on how to get from the Canada we want to the Canada we have to the Canada we want.
Yeah.
My name is V Bui. I'm the regional organizer in Ontario, Quebec with the Council of Canadians. And I would just start by acknowledging that I am calling this call today from unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. And we know that all of us here today are on Indigenous land. I think that there's a lot of conversation that's going to take place today that talk about Canada as a country, but and what it means as it face threat from other countries and also from like the corporate class. But I just want to ground us in the reality that Canada is the entirety of Canada is Indigenous land. We are all treaty people, and that our very first and foremost responsibility is with the original is to respect Indigenous sovereignty. That's the sovereignty that matters first and foremost, and that our work continues to be to respect, uphold their rights, and to honor the treaty agreements with Indigenous people where you're based. So I'm inviting you all to share what Indigenous land you're calling in from today in the chat, just to say hello. And I know that as we continue the conversation today about um, the impact of corporate greed on our land and water and democracy, we stay grounded in in that context. We're gathering here today from the Council of Canadians. We are an organization with 40 years of history. We're actually celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. And the organization is advocating on behalf of people, for the people, planet, and democracy, working on campaign to advance climate justice, water protection, um, healthcare, and democracy. And a lot of that work is, at the end of the day, confronting what it means, the impact of corporate capture and corporate greed on the way that we control our daily lives. And so, yeah, if you are new to the Council of Canadians, welcome. And then I know that many of you have been a member for a long time or have been like active grassroots activists. So we're welcome. Appreciate you being here with us. So I would get started with what our event, what we will be spending the next hour and a half talking about. So today we will be in a minute, I will be passing it over to my colleague Nick Barry Shaw, who will be talking about who will be sharing a little bit of the political context in which we find ourselves in. And I know that like that context is changing by the day for many of us. We'll then share space with three panelists who will unpack a little bit more about what that political context look like in each of our community, and then diagnose what the problem is. I think many of us are here because we realize the threat of uh, uh, Pierre Poilievre and the rising far right on many of the environment, climate action, and many of the social services that we rely on. And then we'll spend some time breaking into small groups to talk about, to just answer some of those questions among ourselves, get to know one another. And then we'll come back and we'll share with you what the plan is. How are we getting from the Canada we have currently to the Canada we want? And then we'll get to work. I know, man, I am an organizer, always ready to and excited to get to work. So I'm excited that 300 of us are here, ready to get to work. And without further ado, I will pass it over to my colleague, Nick Barry Shaw, who is going to take on the next section of this event.
All right. Thank you, V. Thanks everyone for being here. 300 people. This is amazing from across the country. Love to see all the cities being named in the chat. Please do continue to do that as you come in. So yeah, we're here because we're launching our national campaign around the upcoming federal election. And naturally, it's focused on this man. The Council of Canadians has been campaigning for pharmacare over the past year, for clean drinking water, for First Nations communities, and a host of other issues for climate change. And so, as we saw, like many people and like many progressive organizations, we saw Pierre Poilievre rising in the polls over the last 2 years. We recognized that this was obviously a really clear and present danger. This was something that we needed to get ready and organized to push back. And we were hearing from our chapter members that this was something that was important for them and that they wanted for us to work on. And so I think this is the context for our election campaign, and the recognition that we need, first of all, to really to stop Poilievre, but that stopping Poilievre, to do that, first we have to understand the conditions and the forces that have been driving him, at least up until recently, to the head of the pack when it comes to the federal politics. And so I think we can move to the next slide. The first thing that has really gone into our thinking about this election and the factors that are kind of influencing the political situation is just the profound series of crises that Canadians are currently living through. We've seen wildfires that have consumed entire communities. We've seen droughts. We've seen extreme flooding, all manifestations of the climate crisis that our leaders over the past few decades have done far too little to address. We have a healthcare system that is in many ways on the brink of collapse and is under assault from provincial governments trying to privatize it wholesale. We have a cost of living crisis that is hitting Canadians everywhere extremely hard. Going to the grocery store is a tremendous shock for people. And there is, of course, a housing crisis that is hitting people, and rents are out of control. Young people cannot afford to buy a home. And so all of these things, to which we could add the international crisis and the tariff crisis that we're now facing, now that Trump has brought in his 25% tariff. So I think this is one of the key elements of understanding the current situation as we kind of approach the federal elections. And we can go to the next slide. The other aspect is that we're living through a new Gilded Age, right? Inequality in Canada has never been higher. While workers are struggling to keep up with the price of food and rent, the richest among us have been getting only richer. So this is the cover of a recent publication of Maclean's from their Rich List, where they showed that the combined wealth of just the 10 wealthiest Canadians has grown to $261 billion, which is more than quadrupling over the last 2 decades from what it was in 2004 of $60 billion. So there's been a tremendous polarization within Canadian society, and that's a huge political factor influencing how people think and how people are inclined to vote. And so the next thing that has really factored into our thinking about this election, we can go to the next slide, has been the widespread frustration with the status quo. And so we've seen that people are increasingly distrustful of politicians, they're distrustful of the media, and many people are checking out of the political process. People are very much unhappy with the status quo, and are, especially people on the left end of the political spectrum, feel like politicians do not represent their views and do not really speak up for them. And so we can go to the next slide. And so in that context, I think one of the things that's clear when we're asking ourselves, like, well, where has Poilievre been coming from? It's that he has been able to respond to this context, right? Much of his electioneering has been basically repeating stories of working class people and what they're living through in this country. And he has explicitly kind of developed a story of himself as someone who comes from a working class background and has very much presented him as a working class hero. And so I think there's a recognition on the part of Poilievre and his team of this fact that of the growing inequality. I think there's been a recognition of the multiple crises that people are living through with their slogan, Canada is broken. And I think he's tapped into a lot of legitimate anger at the status quo and disillusionment with the status quo through his speeches and through his attempt, as ridiculous as it may seem to some people, but for people who are kind of distant from the political system, to present himself as an outsider, as someone who stands outside of the existing setup. Now you have to say that the existing, the Liberal government until recently had not helped itself very much, and we can go to the next slide. Increasingly, what's been going on is the Liberal Party claiming to speak for progressives and often monopolizing that voice, were increasingly presenting themselves as defenders of the status quo, right? And so this was just a really humorous juxtaposition of the ill-fated Harris-Walz campaign slogan and the Liberals reprising that, saying we won't go back. And I think this was in many ways doing a lot of Poilievre's work for him. But I think that stance reflects the fact that what's on offer has not been adequate to the crisis, has not tried to challenge the corporate agenda that is at the root of these crises, and has really left people like ourselves politically homeless, right? And so I think that's the last thing I would say, is that for what is not driving the support for Pierre Poilievre is not any kind of massive swing to the right in the Canadian population. And so in preparing this campaign, which we did before the Trump tariffs and the crisis hit, one of the things that we were kind of convinced of was that Poilievre's massive lead in the polls, which if that had held, would have meant he could probably have the largest majority government in federal elections history. We were convinced that that wasn't inevitable, right? We were convinced that his support was not as solid as it seemed. And that if we intervened in this election, if we got organized, and if we went out then into the community to speak to people, to let them know what was coming and to urge them not to vote for the Conservatives and to get organized with us, that there was a possibility that we could turn this around. And so we can go to the next slide. Yeah, and so this was a conclusion that we made before all the Trump stuff hit the fan, as it were. And so this is a graph for those of you who can see it. I see some people in the chat saying they can't see the slides. I hope you can now, because this is a graph that shows polling aggregates from the website 338.com. And it shows that, as Yogi Berra said, it's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. So ever since Trump has started making his threats of annexation and his tariff threats, which are now just being put into effect, the Conservative vote has collapsed. And I think this even, things have been moving so fast that I think even this slide is outdated now, and the predictions are different. But I guess what it underlines for me is the importance of what we do going into this election and the need to get organized going into this election, because anything is possible. Things are in the air, and so our intervention that we can make is going to count and is going to have an impact. And so I think the first step that we're really at is we need to gather the people around us and really build our base, bring people together to kind of grapple with this situation, which I think when we're at home by ourselves, scrolling on our phones, it can feel absolutely overwhelming. and disorienting. And I think the only way to kind of get a handle on it is to collectively come together and try to analyze it together. And so I have three guests here on the Zoom. We can stop sharing the screen with me. I'm very excited to introduce them. If we can spotlight them, that would be great. Yes, so we have, I guess we can go west to east. We have Atia Jafar, who is a community organizer and a member of Parents for Palestine and is based in Vancouver, BC. We have Doug Nesbitt, who has been around organized labor and the left for 25 years as a union organizer, labor researcher, and historian. And he's based in Kingston, Ontario. And he's also one of the friends I made when I went to study labor history at Queen's. Glad to have you here, Doug. And then finally, Margaret Ann McHugh, who works as a community organizer with the Halifax Workers Action Centre and is co-chair of the Dartmouth Acorn chapter. She's also a volunteer animator and coordinator of Seniors for Climate Halifax. Margaret Ann, Doug, Atia, welcome. Thank you so much for being here tonight for this campaign launch. And so I've just kind of done a bit of a monologue which more or less maps the campaign materials that we have prepared for our supporters and our chapters. And so I guess I just wanted to start off, and I'll start off with Atia, talking about living in a time of crisis. And so just for you in your community or in your personal life, like which of the many overlapping crises would you say are hitting home for you, are affecting you or your community most intensely at this moment?
Yeah, of course. This is it's a challenging time. It's hard to name one crisis. I was taking my kiddo to daycare this morning and listening to the CBC and trying to make sense of what does this tariff trade war mean for us and our family? What does it mean for our neighbors? What does it mean for our community? And I think this is really the uncertainty of this moment is what's hitting me really, really hard. I think just thinking about how much will it cost to put food on the table, as our rent is already increasing, it increases every year, but our salaries don't, our income doesn't. So just, that little margin is of like how much we save, how much we can put away for my kiddo's education in the future. Like all of that is just like that margin is shrinking. So I'm really feeling the tightness of that and thinking about the summer, if we're looking at another heat wave as we have seen over the last few years, or if we're looking at wildfires, is this cost of living crisis that is seemingly getting worse, is it going to impact our ability to be resilient in the face of emergencies? And I think those of us that are out west, like we had a little bit of an earthquake and we had another one. And so it's a climate emergency, it's a potential earthquake, it's any emergency overlapping with a cost of living crisis. When you're not able to make basic ends meet, can you actually like have a preparedness plan or a preparedness kit? So yeah, just thinking about it and thinking about how everything overlaps, and it's a little bit sad.
It's overwhelming. Yeah, I've had soccer matches for my league that were canceled because of wildfires. We've been canceling more and more soccer matches. Is kind of the trivial things that hit home for me, like seeing the winters get shorter here in Montreal, when we usually used to have so much snow. It's something that definitely touches me quite a bit too. Doug, we'll go to you.
Okay, yeah.
They're affecting Kingston.
Yeah, Kingston, wow. Thanks for having me, and it's pretty exciting to hear everyone speak. Kingston, I don't know how much this sounds like the rest of the country, but we've got a homelessness crisis that we haven't experienced since maybe the 90s. There's many street people, and at the same time, we've got a kind of developer first bonanza of construction going on in the city. It's all unaffordable housing for people who actually need it. At the same time, we have I'm on the doctor wait list, the Ontario's longest. Talk about hallway medicine. We've got I think 2.5 million people on doctor wait lists, and so there have been Cases here in Kingston, I think there was one that happened last year. One of the clinics said, you know, we have an open period of accepting new patients. You know, an hour before the place even opens, there's hundreds of people lined up down the street on some workday morning. We also have massive layoffs happening in St. Lawrence College and Queen's University here in Kingston. And just by, I mean, these institutions that are supposedly public no longer even give clear numbers anymore on how many jobs are being lost. But I think you could reasonably estimate between the two universities, there's like 600-700 jobs that have been cut over the last year and a half.
Whoa.
And those are numbers that were equivalent to the big deindustrialization that happened in Kingston with the big job losses in Alcan in the 1980s. And then, of course, we've got this EV battery plant that's being set up in Loyalist County next door to Kingston. And that has actually
Learn grounding them out.
getting a
Fucking
$1.5
asshole.
billion subsidy.
Fucking
The
block me.
whole facility has been basically paused. The construction's been paused, and it doesn't even look like it's going to go through despite this massive amount of subsidies. And it's all tied into the tariffs they put on China, that they don't want to accept one of the parts that's going to be used in the battery plant. So it's, you know, absurdities all over the place, and large numbers of people are suffering consequences. And I think you really laid it out well, that people are looking for an answer, but
Yeah.
there isn't really one.
Absolutely. Margaret Ann, pass it over to you.
Well, Nova Scotia's among the poorest provinces in the country, so we were already in crisis. The housing situation is unbelievably bad. We do homelessness counts here. I mean, it's not a big city, and we had around 1,200 people on the by name list who were homeless. Of those, about 130 were seniors. And of those, 100 had no other problem. They didn't have social problems or addictions or anything. They were just seniors that didn't have enough money to have an apartment. So housing is huge. We have all kinds of unhoused people, and the market's now segmenting. We had a premier who said, oh, build it, build it, build it, you know, and once we have enough apartments, no, what's happened is that there's nothing for rent less than around $2,000 a month. And the median income here is $36,400. So the two things don't meet. In addition, we just elected a government in Nova Scotia that has these incredible democratic, they want to put in place incredible democratic deficits. They tried to put in legislation to fire the Auditor General at will, to make it much harder to FOIPOP, to control what happens in the House, the committees, the members of the committee. They've stopped all kinds of reports from healthcare. So, I mean, things generally do feel like it's a big crisis that's being. So housing is probably our biggest crisis. Food, we have a huge energy poverty here. Most people heat with oil. And many people, if they're in apartments, they have electric heat often, which is not paid, like it's extra on top of their rent. And the rates are very high. So we have housing crisis, energy poverty, food we can't afford, and a government that instead of looking to solve any of those problems is looking to get a lot of power for themselves and make sure that nobody gets any information or can organize to get things done.
Yeah. All right. Well, Pierre Poilievre would say he has the solution. He's going to build the homes, stop the crime, axe the tax, fix the budget. He has a 3-word slogan for every single one of these problems that people are facing. And so maybe we could just go in reverse order and just talk about, you know, what are actually the root causes of some of these problems. We were talking about homelessness, cost of energy, cost of home heating. So yeah, we could start with you, Margaret Ann. What are the root causes?
Clearly profit and greed, not just profit, although, you know, I would take it away if I could, let's face it. But the idea that, for instance, in housing, this predatory landlordism and making housing into a commodity. So those are the things that seem to me to be driving all this, is that we're making the rich richer, and we're putting in place laws, regulations, and legislation that make it easier for the rich to get richer. And they do that on the backs of the poor and working class people.
Mhm.
And so that's what I see as Pierre Poilievre is just the sort of peak of that. And people don't trust all politicians. And in fact, I think what I hear here from people that sort of feel like maybe they're his supporter, I think you're right, though, it's not deep because like I find that I had 10 minutes with a cab driver and I talked him out of Poilievre in 10 minutes because it was all economics, like his ideas. And so I could quickly dispel them. They're mostly based on myth. But often when I'm talking to Poilievre supporters, as soon as I can defeat or at least have a decent argument economically, they switch to hate, which is why I think you're right. I don't think it's very deep because they'll start talking about trans people and how Trudeau's, made all the trans people, that sort of thing. It's not based on anything real. And so I think it's there, but it's just sort of a disgruntledness for the most part. And those people that have that real hate on are a small portion of the population.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been reading a bit of, it's awful to read it, but people around Poilievre, his comms director and so on, and they are pretty clear-eyed about how little they're actually offering working class people, even though they made this big part of their marketing. And they say, well, in order to compensate, we need to keep those working class voters on board by turning up the anti-woke agenda, turning up the scare about trans kids, and turning up all that stuff, the anti-identity politics stuff. And so I think you're absolutely right that we need to be ready for that. And I think, one of the things I saw with the recent elections in Germany, for instance, Die Linke, which is the German left party, they had quite a good performance in an election that was otherwise quite bad. But one of the things they put out was a pamphlet that said, trans people exist, billionaires shouldn't. And I love that. And I felt like it kind of is an example of how, when we're faced with those people, we can kind of bring things back to what unites us and what we're up against. So yeah, totally agree with you, Margaret Ann. Doug, root causes. Is Pierre Poilievre going to solve things for us?
Well, I think that, in addition to what Margaret Ann was saying, profit and greed being the motivating cause there, the continuity of the Conservatives with the same political project that set us on this trajectory in the 1980s. It's taking the situation that we're in now, and I think that the Council of Canadians, the work that you've laid out is very good. But even adapting to this latest, twist of fortunes with Trump laying on the tariffs, is that this is a political party that got us into this mess. This was one of the political parties that marched us down this road, and that battle that happened in the 1980s, the alternatives that were put on the table by the social movements, especially the labor movement, the left in this country, and many forces that joined together to fight it. I think that is, part of the solution that we want to actually be looking for. So, beyond the debates with Poilievre supporters themselves, I think that this cycles back to we know we're against Poilievre, but in developing our anti-Poilievre campaign, I think that the big challenge is going to be what's the next step after that, not just being in the defensive mode. Because I think that the root causes is, sometimes it just seems so obvious, but it's really the lack of anywhere to put that obvious politics.
Yeah. Atia, do you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I think a lot has just been said already. I definitely agree. This corporate greed, this need to just price gouge us so that the wealthy few can make their billions. It's a really broken system, and I think we have to, recognize that billionaires and greedy corporations are responsible, but we can't let our politicians off the hook because it's um, they have just basically happily accepted this agenda that was written by wealthy, powerful corporations and billionaires. They've deregulated and cut essential services. And, the irony of just in the United States watching the wealthiest person in the world cut essential social services and lifelines for everyday people. It's absurd. And I think, it's not just conservative politicians, it's not just Trump, it's politicians in every party that have capitulated to corporate interests at every step. I see this even in BC. We have an NDP government, and even they are, talking about pipelines right now. They are not really looking out for renters in the ways that they should. I think that all governments of just across various party lines need to be stronger, and they need to be accountable to the people and not just the corporations that are writing up wish lists and getting everything that they want. So yeah, I would love to see us fight for a better future that we know is possible. We know it's possible to have our government actually invest in us, to invest in our communities, to invest in things that would not just create jobs, but that would make life better for everyday people while tackling things like the climate emergency. I was reading a blog by Hadrian from the CCPA earlier today, and it gave me a lot of hope because I was thinking about how it's true we could build an east-west grid instead of pipelines that make big oil richer. We can create a grid that allows people across the country to access the cheapest form of electricity, renewable energy. And we can build rapid rail that connects communities and helps us strengthen a pan-Canadian economy. So there's so much that we can do if our government's invested in us. And yeah, we just can't take politicians off the hook right now.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think both Doug and Atia, you're making kind of similar points of like, there's this corporate agenda that has been pursued by parties of every political stripe, right, in Canada, both at provincial and federal levels. And I think that's something that you won't hear elsewhere. And it's something that the council was really founded to kind of highlight and fight against and develop alternatives to. Because I think in the media, when you hear about like why Trudeau had to resign, why the Liberal Party had tanked in terms of support, it's like, oh, well, they went too far left, and this has even been validated by a lot of the leadership candidates that are running to replace Justin Trudeau. But I think it's quite the opposite, which is that they did not challenge the corporate agenda nearly enough, and it means that their response to these crises have been utterly inadequate, if not serving to reinforce them. And so I think, through planning this campaign, we've tried to kind of keep a double vision, right? Of we have to recognize the danger that a majority, especially a Poilievre majority government, would represent for Canadians, and especially for working class Canadians, for the climate, for Indigenous people, while at the same time seeing that bigger picture that you guys are talking about, which is the corporate agenda that has been kind of rolled out since the 1980s. And so I think there is still, again, when we started planning this campaign, it seemed like, well, we really have to be ready for a Poilievre majority government. And I think we still have to be ready because we have no idea what's going to happen between now and when people go to the polls. I think that's the only thing I'm certain of, is anything is possible at this point politically at the federal level of the elections. And so I just wanted to ask each of you to kind of wrap up, if you know of any examples or have even participated in any kind of examples of movements that have successfully fought back, right? That have fought back against hard right governments in power, that have fought back against the corporate agenda and won. Because I think that is one of the other messages that we are trying to bring through this campaign, is that whatever happens on election day, the fight isn't over, and we have to intervene in the election to build our forces up so that we are ready to take that struggle up. And I think one of the ways in which we can kind of gain a bit of perspective on our situation is precisely by thinking about those kind of situations where movements have carried that off. So I don't know who wants to jump in first, but I know you all have a wealth of knowledge about these things. I see Margaret Ann is off mute, so I'll go to you if you want to jump in first.
I was just thinking, I mean, we count it as a win in that in Nova Scotia, both certainly with the NDP, ACORN, which is the tenants union, Dow Legal, tenants' rights, just all kinds of people. But we did win rent control. We had no rent control in this province at all until 2022. And we did win rent control when things just went out of hand. Now, I think the government looked at it and thought, how many people are we going to put on the street in addition? But it did take a lot. I mean, that was a coordinated issue-based campaign to get something. And we won it. And we won it with what turns out to be quite a right-wing conservative government. They weren't in their first term. I'm not sure. It's like they looked south and went, oh, look what you can do. But either that, or I think they may actually have distributed the playbook. But yeah, my big example here is that we won rent control and we won it in the last few years.
Amazing. That's great to hear. Doug?
I'll kind of answer the question by twisting it around a little bit. I don't want to focus in on any one particular battle that I might have been involved personally as part of larger groups, but I always found the most successful organizations around the campaigns, whether we won or lost, were the ones that we were able to, the life was able to extend in some way beyond, whether it meant evolving into a different organization or left behind some kind of organization that maybe the people who started it didn't stay with, but another group came and took it over. So whether that was, any kind of independent media, there's an institution that you can set up and you can do it locally. You don't have to be pumping out even a monthly newspaper, but you can have local independent media that's monitoring questions of power, of who does what, where you live. And there have been lots of successful efforts. And sometimes they come and go, but around them you can actually pull people. And I do recall when the Fight for 15 campaign was kind of at its high point in Ontario, there were a lot of twists and turns in that because it got absorbed into the politics of, kind of the problem of success demanding kind of a legislative reform is that it got pulled into the Liberal Party's agenda of trying to get reelected. So they adopted aspects of the demands. Then it got part of the battle after Ford got elected. And so it raised all these problems of what these groups of Fight for 15 activists were actually supposed to do. At least in Kingston, we were able to, we always did educational events where we tried to bring an issue forward and talk about it. And so that allowed it to, those networks still exist today in Kingston. It forged something that I think that we laid a foundation that we can build some more stuff out of. And there has been stuff that came out of it. There has been tenant organizing. There has been battles over privatization of recycling, over different developments that have been happening locally. Of course, ultimately it's locally, and the battle against Poilievre is coast to coast to coast. So I think that, I do appreciate that the Council of Canadians is trying to provide that kind of asymmetrical federalism to everybody's local efforts at combating Poilievre. And I am hoping that the Council of Canadians will have some good literature mail drops that we can do some local work around leading up to this election.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. We absolutely will. Atia, I'm going to give you the last word, and then we're going to wrap up. Any movements that have been inspiring for you?
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you so much. Thank you for all of the work that you've done, Doug and Margaret. Thank you for the wins that you've secured for our communities. I am thinking about various things. It's so important to actually take time to think about wins. And I don't think I do it often enough, but our movements do have power. I have been organizing with Palestine Solidarity groups locally for the last year and a half. And I think one thing that I do find really inspiring is that we did win a one-way arms embargo. There are loopholes and it could be much stronger. It needs to be a two-way arms embargo, but we did win that. And I think it was a product of collective organizing across the country in communities. There were so many writing groups that that sprouted in communities across the country, and they participated in a coordinated effort, but also a very locally specific effort to push members of parliament and to particularly focus on those backbencher MPs that are noticing that their seats are a little bit vulnerable, and they really do want to, listen to their communities. So I thought it was really inspiring. I am in Vancouver Granville, which is it was one of the closest races in the last election, and we do have a Liberal MP who barely scraped by. And thanks to local organizing by Van Grand for Palestine, he went from being completely silent on Palestine and ignoring his constituents, leaving his office whenever constituents were there, to actually attending town halls hosted by constituents because he felt the pressure. And he became a voice for really breaking this Liberal Party position on Palestine. And I will by no means say that Tlaib Noor Mohammed, my MP, is at all a champion in any way, but I think even this very weak, very low moral compass MP was pushed thanks to community organizing. And I had the really great opportunity to organize with parents in the community, which I think is very special because with parents, there's such a clear moral imperative to be a part of this movement that's fighting for children to be safe, everywhere, for children to be safe, and for us to not be complicit in these war crimes, in these bombs that are being dropped on children and their families. So we hosted events that were very much about building community, and so bringing together people who wouldn't otherwise consider themselves political. We hosted story times, which brought families together. Kids could play, they ate their snacks, and they also learned a little bit about what was happening in other parts of the world. They heard stories from other parts of the world, and parents felt more committed to this kind of community organizing because they felt that their families were really very much included in it. And so that this led to us, doing a bit more more political things, but that were family centered. So we did a big kite action where children flew kites, and they were calling for an arms embargo. They were calling for a ceasefire. They were calling for increased aid. And this was really great because it brought a lot of media out. There are not often children-centered actions, and it also made our movement stronger because all these folks that are sometimes thinking like, oh, I can't be an activist because I have children, I can't go to protests. This was a space that brought them in and raised this very strong, powerful voice about how parents were standing up for a better future, which inevitably had a huge impact on not just media and public perception, but also on MPs. And eventually, I think it was contributed to this collective movement across the country that was about pushing for an arms embargo, but just a stronger position for Palestine.
That's great. Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think what you were saying about not it not being a typically activist action, I think that's so important, right? Because I think sometimes we have in our head a very limited set of tactics and approaches that would qualify as sufficiently activist. But we need to be doing things that open that door and give people that possibility to take leadership and to participate in the movement. And so that's what we're trying to do through this national campaign. So I want to thank each of you for taking your time to be here. This is a really rich discussion. I wish it could go on for another hour or so. We're going to keep moving on, but thank you so much, Margaret Ann, Atia, and Doug. And so we're going to go on to the next part of the program. Thank you so much.
May I just interject, because I have to leave like within a minute or two, and I have this
I don't
rather.
think we have a time for dialogue. We're going to go actually into breakout rooms, so we're going to have a chance to talk about that. But Angela, if you could put the slide up, the last slide up, I'm going to present a bit more in detail the campaign plan that we've been developing and that we're here to present. I hope everybody can see this. I know there's been some trouble with the screen share, but I'll read out the slide. So this is the kind of discussion that we want to help you to host in your community with people you know as a first step, right? And so really in this campaign plan, we've been talking about kind of 5 steps, more or less, right? The first step is we need to build our base, right? We need to have opportunities to sit down with people who are like-minded, who feel politically homeless, who are progressive and who are concerned about the threat of a Poilievre majority government, and to work through these questions, right? In the kind of a way that we were just working through them now, to think about that. And so we've prepared materials to do this, and then my colleague V is going to come on to talk about them more. The next step is to rally our allies. And so I think Doug was talking about this, of getting local groups together to have these discussions and do this on a bigger scale. Then we need to intervene in the election. We need to blunt the blue wave. We need to make sure that people are aware of the danger of a Poilievre majority government, the threat it represents to our healthcare, the threat he represents to union workers and people workers' rights, the threat that he represents to Indigenous people and the environment, and work as hard as we can to influence the outcome of the election so that we do not end up with a Poilievre majority government. Syed Hassan, who is an activist that we collaborate frequently with the Migrant Workers Alliance for Change, said about this election in a recent article that we are choosing our opposition, right? Those are the stakes of this election. We're not in a position to be electing the government that we want. We are in the process of fighting to choose our opposition, and then we have to be building to be ready for that opposition. We have to be building up a movement to fight the corporate agenda at the national level, and then to put forward alternatives for the Canada we want. A Canada that is more egalitarian, that is confronting the climate crisis that the world is facing, and that is oriented on the international stage towards peace rather than war and militarism. And so I think that's a huge undertaking, but I think we have an opening to start that work if we consciously carry through with this and kind of have that double vision of, yes, we have to fight Poilievre, and yes, we have to organize to develop an alternative to the corporate agenda that has created these crises and has put us in the situation we are in. So it's not just one person we're fighting, it's an entire political agenda, and we have to organize in consequence. So that is our campaign plan. And really the first step, though, is reaching out to people and having conversations like these and getting people together in an intimate situation to build our base. And so I'm going to pass it off to our organizer extraordinaire, V. Bui, who's going to talk a bit more about how to do that and the materials that we've developed for this campaign to help you do it.
Thank you, Nick. And yeah, props to our panelists for contributing their personal experience and of all the work they do in their community. What we were doing now, before jumping in, is just to give you a taste of what the kind of political discourse there isn't space for in this political context. We've been calling these small group discussion kitchen table conversation, but don't get hung up on the kitchen or the table. It's the conversation. So what we're going to do now is, if my colleague could throw the questions in the chat and also to put the slide up, what we're going to do is break you into small groups. It is an insurmountable task to break into small group with 300 people. In an ideal world, we would have just put you in a group with people who are geographically closer to each other. It's not possible in the Zoom room, but imagine it. It's great. And so we're asking you to get into a small group. There will be between 5 and 7 of you in a group. Some groups will have a facilitator who can join and help us shepherd through the discussion. But I know that many of you are organizers, leaders in your community. Just make sure that the conversation keeps moving. What we're asking you to do is to answer these questions. How does the political framework that Nick had just shared and our panelists, how does that resonate with you? How are these issues and the broader corporate agenda affecting you or your community? And then what collective action might you take for yourself or in solidarity with directly affected people? So these questions will go in the chat and you will be able to see them when we open the breakout rooms. And then we'll spend, we also have a little bit Google slide that allows you to take notes. You can if you want to, you don't have to. I think it's important for people to be able to like be in conversation with one another. So like no need to like capture the script or anything. But if you would like to use the slide deck, it's in the chat, and it will allow you to you can just go to the slide that is the group number of the breakout group you're in, and then you can take notes, and then we'll capture these notes after because it's meaningful to us to know what were discussed. But essentially, these are the main question. What do you think about what we just talked about? How is it affecting you personally or your community? And what are you going to do about it? So, all right. I think the task before us is clear. Can we please open the breakout rooms? We'll have 25 minutes in the breakouts. If there will be folks who volunteer to facilitate. You can join the room and then introduce yourself. There will be more rooms that have no facilitators than there are. It's just a chat. We want to make space for you to reflect, to share, to.
That link didn't work.
Yeah. All right. So could we please open the breakout rooms and then also put the questions in the chat, please? I'm gonna,
So
you
the
know what? The link is not linking. I mean, I hear
For some reason,
the link is
the
not
chat
linking.
seems to be disabled.
The chat is disabled.
Yeah, mine is anyway.
Everyone, is it back now?
Yes.
All right, sorry, my bad. So I just put the questions in the chat, and then the link to the slides are also in the chat. Okay, breakout room, please. Can we launch a breakout room? We have 25 minutes, so off you go. I hope you have fun. You get to talk to people that you don't typically talk to, which I love. Off you go. If you have any technical questions or issue, just let us know. If you could unspotlight me, then I will be able to provide any support necessary. I see people are trickling into their rooms. This is working out so well. There are only 18 people back in the main room. Hi. Our folks who are still here, you don't want to join a breakout room or you need help?
I have no idea how to join a breakout room.
Okay, it's Tina, right?
Yes.
There should be a window that pop up on your Zoom that just says joining breakout room, and then you just hit join.
Thanks so much, folks. I'm gonna head out. I really
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Atia.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Take care.
Yeah.
Say bye to Judy.
Take care. Thanks
All
for
right. Is our folks, others
Hi.
who are still here, struggling with the
I've got a
breakout?
different, sorry, I've got a
Yes.
different message. Mine says the host is open to breakout rooms.
Yes,
Please
and
wait
then
to be assigned.
oh, you're not assigned. Can we help Vicky, please? Vicky is not assigned.
I'll help.
Yeah,
Vicky.
working on it now.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay,
Okay.
Dylan is.
All
Who
right,
else needs
kids.
help?
Okay, who else needs help?
Tina and
still have-
Robert.
Tina,
I also have
you
a lovely screen of all of you guys. Very nice. Nice to see you. I don't have any idea, however, how to get anything else.
okay? Oh, I think you're not assigned. I'm gonna assign you to room 1, Tina.
Okie doke.
Off you go. Did you see
What
a thing pop
about
up?
Robert? Or Corinne?
Yeah, it says my speaker's not working, but can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
So why is my speaker not working?
I don't know. I can hear you. Did you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Well, then everything is fine.
But it gives me, when I'm in the breakout room, it says my speaker's not working.
Interesting.
Do you just need to maybe click the little arrow beside the mute and unmute button?
Well, I'm unmuted and I was unmuted then.
I'm not talking about the actual mute button. I'm saying the arrow beside it, which pops up a little select microphone, select a speaker, test speaker and microphone, etc. That might help.
Well, you'd have to put me back in then, I guess.
Do you know which room you were in?
No. I'm not very adept.
That's all right. No worries. Dylan, do you know where Corinne? Okay. At room 11. It should still, you should still have an option to join your breakout room.
How do I do it then?
It might be under the 3 dots right beside the leave the meeting at the bottom right.
Where it says more,
Yeah,
Exactly.
then I get a bunch of choices.
and
Yeah,
then choose
and
breakout room.
rooms.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mary, you're here. Can I help you?
Hello. I was in a breakout room. There were 4 other people.
Hmm?
And I unmuted myself and invited the others to speak, and nobody did. One person left, and there was still no sound or faces from the other 3. I asked a few times and came back here.
Which room were you in?
There was a Susan, a Tay, shown about. I don't remember the number, maybe 11, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. It's room 12. I see it here on the list.
Okay. So there's a Susan, a Rose, and a Trevor. Yeah.
No
Okay,
one
and-
spoke, and eventually Tay left. The
They're
other
still
3
in there.
What?
They're still in there, according to my list.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't I just send you to a different room?
No, Tay.
Eagle's in there as well right now. So maybe if you rejoin, he's trying to help get things going there.
How do I rejoin?
Should just be under the 3 ellipses beside the exit meeting. You click on that and then it will show breakout rooms.
Yes.
Good luck, Mary. Thanks for joining.
Anyone else need help? Alicia, Nikki, Gary? Hi, Sherry.
Hi, did we just end?
No.
We are in breakout rooms.
Mm-hmm.
Sherry
And it
just-
looks,
Yeah, I've just
Yeah.
been sending some folks who've been joining here into the breakout rooms with smaller numbers.
okay. Thanks, Don.
No problem.
I'm not sure
Thanks.
if Alicia and Gary, can you hear us? You're on mute if you can.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Did you just join us or you?
Yeah,
everyone's in
sorry, I
breakout
thought
rooms
the
right now?
meeting was at 7.
Oh,
I think I
okay.
missed most of it. I'll watch the recording.
Everyone's in breakout rooms right now. If you wanted to join, they're just getting started, really.
Yeah, there are 200
It's up
people
to you.
here still, Gary. You haven't missed the best part, which is the call to action.
Okay, do I pick a breakout room or will you just put me in one?
We can put you in one.
Okay.
Yeah. V's on it by the looks of it. No?
I am not, but I
Okay.
will. I'm on it. I'm yeah, you go in.
Oh, it
into-
looks like you're assigned to room 11.
Okay, off you
So
go.
you should have the option. There you go. All right, Vanessa and Magdalene, you're both on mute.
Hello, everybody is coming back now. Welcome,
Come
welcome.
on. Room 31 was just getting going.
Oh, you just getting going. That is exactly the answer I want to hear. Is you just getting going. Well, there will be more. Okay, we are going to give the rest of the other rooms another 19, 15 seconds. It's closing and then everyone will flood back in. But I hope you folks have a great time in your small group. General nod, head shakes. I see so many nods. It's wonderful.
It was awesome.
It was awesome? Who said it?
Yes.
I want to hear.
It was, yeah. So it
Yeah?
was Nobel come in, and we were from Vancouver Island all the way to Newfoundland.
Amazing. That's what
Yes,
we
it
want.
was.
I mean,
It was.
a rare benefit. I mean, there's a lot of benefit to a national organization is that you got people, you get to talk to people from across the country. We won't have time to answer question, Nancy, but if you put it in the chat, one of my colleagues will be able to help you with whatever questions you have. Welcome back, folks. I don't know if I'm talking to 25 people or 200. But I hope folks had a great time in the small group. And if you could please mute yourself if you're not speaking. If you just don't mute, just mute yourself. All right. We're back at the main program. I hope that you have a great time in the small group. I know it's not going to be long enough. These are never long enough. And that is because we just hope that it will give you a little taste of what a small group discussion where we unpack the political context would look like. And so now I'm going to spend you a few minutes to watch this video. Back in October of 2023, we had another mass webinar where with 800 people, where we invite movement leaders to come speak to us about to unpack the political moment. And so Saeed Hassan, who is the executive director of the Migrants' Rights Alliance for Change and also secretary of the Migrants' Rights Network, share with us a lot of like some of the learnings and the lessons and the reflections about organizing in this moment that I would like to uplift in as we come out of discussion about issues and jumping into about what we're doing about it. All right, here we go.
Our cynicism has made us abandon the task. And so what I want to say to you is that we are absolutely capable of winning the justice in the worlds we all deserve. And it requires each and every one of you to take one step further. But for people who are not yet organizing, or perhaps you have been organizing, and when I say organizing, I mean go to a meeting, right? What I want to say to each and every person, where if you are kind of at that cusp, I want you to return to meetings, right? Now, I want to be very clear. Political work where you are sitting around with people, and these are not, I'm going to get to the sort of mystical middle and the others. These are still people you agree with, generally speaking, that you are beginning to organize with. Because we must first consolidate our forces before we convert the masses and understand that these are two actual steps. So that consolidation, that going into meetings is crucial and necessary. We have seen, as Judy's talking about, people have turned away from organizing. We wait for, we might sign petitions, we might join online events. We see even the most important kind of like thought leaders are people who are individuals. They have profiles. They're not speaking on behalf of collectives of people, which has many questions that arise around accountability. Now, I want to be clear. Organizing is difficult, messy, and painful. It is, Judy says, many of the good things that you saw. But I mean, all of the bad things emerge in meetings. Like we all know that. Yeah. But it is the best possible option of all of the others, right? And so in those organizing, what do you do? So I encourage everyone to turn to meetings and then actually identify and wage struggles. Now, if you are in a union, go to your damn union meeting. So, you've got that covered. If you're a migrant, please join us. We will organize every migrant in the country. That is our aim and our objective and our plan. And if not, join a Council of Canadians chapter, right? Like join something and be part of the work and identify struggles that you can take that actually have a material impact on your communities, right? A lot of times we're fighting for something that's so far out there. Yes, we want to fight to stop climate change, but what does that mean in Nanaimo? What does that mean in Kelowna? What does that mean in, Sault Ste. Marie? What does that mean in, Windsor? What does it mean in St. John's? Like, what does it mean there? Fight, because political consciousness emerges through struggle. right? So we are actually articulating our own clarity. And in that moment of organizing, and when you are fighting for something, is when you begin to talk to other people. And at that moment, it is important to be principled, but not purist, right? Principled, but not purist. What I mean is, it's not about going to speak to the ultra rights, but it's also not about kicking people out for not having the exact correct opinion on all matters, right? We have to identify what are the principles on the basis of which we will work with people and how are we going to move them. And then we can talk about kind of messaging and again, as I said, consolidating the forces and then converting the masses. So it is actually about very specific and discrete steps that must be taken that begin with each person sort of pushing themselves one step forward. There's 600 people here. 600 people who are in this webinar. We need 600 more people going to meetings across the country. If you folks, 600 people, were beginning to talk to 10 people, right? And those 10 people were talking to 5, those 5 were talking to 1. The scale that we have at our fingertips is immense, and it requires a focus and to do the work, right? And I think also there's been a lot of questions, right, around we are a year out from a potential Pierre Poilievre government, right? That is the sphere and I absolutely believe we can stop it. And I also believe that even if he wins, our work is not done. Because we are in an intergenerational fight here, right? And, you know, learning a lot from our indigenous communities and elders who have taught us so much is that we need to figure out how to be focused and rooted in our communities. We keep jumping from issue to issue, which we should. We need to be responsive and rooted. So if you are organizing in your community, and if you keep showing up day after day after day, people will trust you and believe you. And then, because you will show up for their struggles, I don't care whether you're fighting to put a new street light somewhere, right? Or getting a new speed bump somewhere, or trying to get that school one more teacher, etc., etc. Like whatever is the fight that makes sense, you fight it. And in that moment, in that work, is that where we form the struggle. Because then when you go and tell people which way to vote, then when you go and tell people which you need to support, then when you go and tell people don't agree to Pierre Poilievre, they're going to listen to you because you have built the trust. It's not going to happen simply because we go and start talking to the ones we don't talk to, right? You can't just go outside the choir. The choir must be hearable to the others. They must see you being the, you know? So I think we need to really break this down into discrete steps. And I invite everyone to even take a moment, if you're here, to think about where are you going to stretch? What are you going to do to save our planet? What are you going to do to save our future? Because the invitation and the presence of organization is our only way out.
All right. So apologies for the crackly audio for some of that, but I think we wanted to highlight that clip because of a few things that Hassan said at that webinar from October. One of the things he said was, before we go out into the community to try to convince people, right, to do something, in this case, don't elect Poilievre, join a fight back against the corporate agenda. Before we do that, we have to get on the same page with our choir, right? And so people often kind of disparage, oh, you're preaching to the choir and so on. But like, I like the point that he was making, and I think it's a very correct one, is that we need to gather together with people in our networks who feel the same way as we do, and try to work through the political context first. And then once we have that established, once we've consolidated that, then we can go out and take action together, right? Once we're on the same page. And so I think that was something that was very important that he mentioned. And, you know, his point about do one more thing, right? And so at the webinar that we did, you know, there were 600 people, and he says, well, if you go out, do one more thing, reach out to 10 people, those 10 people reach out to 5 people, and so on. That is a way of massively expanding the reach of our movement. And I think we are at a stage where we need to do that, right? We need to do this base building work. We need to do this first step of bringing new people who are around us, who are sympathetic towards us. And we need to get on the same page, And then we can take collective action together. Then we can intervene in the political situation. Then we can try to stop Poilievre and win the candidate we want. And so I think that is, it was something that towards which we were already gravitating and planning this campaign and thinking about what the kind of current political moment called from us, from the Council of Canadians, what kind of campaigning was necessary at this moment. And I think that kind of Hassan's comments really crystallized for us the importance of doing this base building work. And so that is the kind of first step of our campaign plan, which my colleague V is going to present to you in more detail now, and which revolves around organizing kitchen table conversations in your community. And so we've prepared some materials, which I saw in the chat. There was some concern, where are the materials? Where are the toolkits? This one is, I've covered mine with notes. I don't know if you can see them, but we have prepared a facilitation guide. We've prepared an election primer. And so V is going to talk about how we are going to use this and let you know about when you can get training in order to organize your own kitchen table conversation. So I'll hand it over to V if she's ready to speak.
I am sure ready to speak. All right. Thanks everybody for the lively discussion in the chat, as well as the conversation that you have in the small groups. What we have been trying to do so far in this event is to try to provide you with what would a conversation in your home looks like. And the idea is that the idea of a kitchen table conversation is a more intimate, cozy, welcoming environment for you to have a more in-depth conversation about both making sense of the political environment, but also building relationship. If you can go to the next slide, please. So you've seen this slide already. My colleague Nick have already spoke about it. But essentially what we're looking at is that every time we come up against the corporate agenda, whether it's locally, provincially, or federally, we don't have the power. We don't have enough people to confront the agenda. And therefore, as a result, federal liberal leadership are being dragged towards the right by Pierre Poilievre. And the question now is that we need to be the win, building the power to move the entire political landscape. And that starts right here in each and every of your community. So I know that like the work we need to do to get to the Canada we want, building the alternative to is also required that we understand and expose and resist the corporate agenda. And that work takes us past elections. But then also we also understand that like the upcoming federal election is a critical moment for us to rally our allies, to expand our base, and to make sure that we are prepared for the moment when whoever gets in and start to chip away at the social services that we hold dear, that we are ready to organize people, give them the skills and the tool to organize, to fight back. So we can move to the next slide. So what we are doing is essentially inviting you into taking some leadership. And that starts with what we call a KTC. It's a kitchen table conversation. It doesn't have to be in a kitchen. It doesn't have to be in a table. It can be an informal gathering. And the reason there's kitchen there is because food is nice and inviting and welcoming. And it create a welcoming environment. But what we hope to achieve with this small group conversation, which we define at between 5 to 7 people, the size of your breakout room, is that you invite people in, people that you know, people that you have relationship with, people that you don't have to convert. We're not looking to convert anybody. We're organizing the choir. So bringing people who in principle share the same core values, but could be doing more to engage in the political work. And then what we come together, we make sense of the political moment. What I call among my colleagues is practicing the harmonies within the choir. We build relationships. We make sure that like before we take the next steps, we have a strong way of relating to each other, and then we discuss next future actions. We go to the next slide, please. The reason that we're doing, why were we doing kitchen table conversation? Like it feels like things are daunting, and what we're asking you as the very first step in building the base is like get in, talk to other people. Is because we're living in a time of like I said, we're living in a time of intensifying crises, and we don't have the political power, and we need to start building that political power. And first of all, that requires that we get aligned on our understanding of why healthcare and climate and social services and workers' rights are being under attack by the same force, and that force is the corporate greed. And then the kitchen table conversations are the starting point for local groups. Each of you know 7 people that you can invite to your home that will be able to have this conversation, and then that serve as a nucleus of local groups that can then take action together in the election and beyond. So that's what we need to do. And I know that like one of the incredible strength of the Council of Canadians is that it has provided so many chapter activists with a political home, and the culture of like engaging with and taking ownership of and leadership in long-term political actions, which is what local chapters have been doing, is very important. And we want to be able to continue creating that space for people to both process the political moment, but also build relationship and take action together. If you go to the next slide, please. This is what you've been asking for: templates and toolbox. So my colleague will pop the link in the chat of essentially what we call a facilitation guide. My colleagues and I work really hard on this set of guide and toolkit. It breaks you down step by step what needs to be done. It provides you with some sample script. It provides you with the major touch points of a conversation, a kitchen table conversation. Essentially, we are providing you with a toolkit and template that you can get started tomorrow if you want to. And then also we have tested this aggressively. You go to the next slide, please. So many of you here are joining us either from London or Halifax. You might know that we recently tried it in a really big scale in town halls, where people are also a given space to have this kind of small group conversation that become a seed for future action. And there's a lot of appetite. This is a photo from London. The next photo in the next slide is from Halifax. So we have 200 people showing up in the room. It's been a long time since I organized an event with 200 people. Props to my 2 folks who managed to pull that off. And then each and every one of us in the staff have also done our conversation with our people. It's very helpful. People are really yearning for the kind of space to have this conversation because there isn't enough of it. And so and people also yearning for the community of getting together and connecting with people. So we've done this. We tried and error it. We know that people are interested. Some of you have had that conversation in your small group. You know what's better than a small group in Zoom is a small group in your house. You know what's better than a small group in a hall in the university is a small group in your living room, having a tea in your hand. It's going to be a great time. And we know that this is the place where the conversation will have. And then we will also facilitate the conversation so that you can facilitate connection so that you can speak to others in your community. And then in the next slide, if the toolkit, if reading a massive toolkit isn't your thing, we are also organizing a training. Can you please go to the next slide? So on Thursday night, 2 days from today, we will provide you a training. The training is on March 6th, it's on Thursday, and we will basically walk you through the entire thing of it. We'll practice it together. Our staff will be here providing you with all the training you need, walk you through the toolkit, making sure that you come out of that meeting feeling extremely confident in hosting your own kitchen table conversation. And then this is the first step, right? This is building the base, and then we'll rally our allies locally and nationally, and then we get together and strategize about what intervention in the election would look like, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so if we could take the slideshow down, I hope that I have done a great job selling you. Don't spotlight me. I don't want to be spotlighted at this moment. I want to spotlight you all. I hope I have done a great job of selling to you how exciting the idea of how hosting a kitchen table conversation is. And now I have some questions for you. There's going to be a poll to pop up in your thingamabob. The first question that I have for you is just answer yes or no or not. But who here have participated in a social movement or progressive group that confront the corporate agenda or far-right governments? Can we launch a poll, please? Okay, folks are raising their hand, which is great, but technically you're supposed to launch a poll. You know what? I'm going to launch a poll. Okay, there's a poll in front of you. It's asking you, have you been part of a social movement that resists the corporate agenda or far-right government? Oh my God, there's so many yeses. Okay, a lot of you are answering the questions. I'm going to give it up for 20 minutes. This is not consequential. I'm not going to hold you to this. I will tell you when I'm actually holding you to these answers to the poll. But I'm going to end the poll now. And right now we have 77 people who have said yes. Amazing. That means that we are standing on the shoulder of giants. A lot of people are here, have had experience fighting this before, and we're ready to do it again. Okay, I'm going to ask you the next question, which is, oh, how do I launch this? Launch. The second question is, have you been part of an election campaign? You can say yes, you can say no. Right now, this is a informal poll. You're just telling me without having to, I can't keep track of 185 people raising their hands, but I can keep track of who has been saying yes or no to polls. So if you're answering, great. If you don't want to answer, that's also chill. The time will come for you to have to answer. Don't worry. So right now I'm going to end this poll. And right now we have 74% of people who are here. 111 people said that they have participated in an election campaign. Huge. But also the 26%, do not worry. Time will come for you to shine. The next question that I have for you is, have you hosted a dinner party, a book club, or a social gathering? Have you hosted a dinner party, a book club, social gathering? Birthday party counts. More people are answering. I'm going to give it 2 more seconds. I don't know if you see where I'm going with this, but I'm going somewhere with this, I promise. All right, I'm going to end the poll right now. 81% of us have done this before. That's because it's familiar. And we're going somewhere with this because the task before us, which is joining a social movement that confronts the corporate agenda and resist a far-right government, feels daunting. But we are here and we are providing you with the support and the tool and the training to take one step at a time in joining something bigger. It maybe an election campaign may be daunting, but the very first step, remember Hassan said, just need to take one next step. The very first step that we're asking you to take today is not that far off from hosting a dinner party or a kitchen or a book club. And that is to host a kitchen table conversation in your community. I have shown you that we have toolkit, we have template. You don't even have to write your own email. You just have to come up with who you're going to invite. We'll have training that's happening on Thursday. So the question that I'm actually going to hold you to is, will you host or attend a kitchen table conversation in your community? I'm going to leave a long time for you to sit with your silence and figure out if you want, how you want to answer this question. How you going to look me in the eyes and say no? Again, the question is, will you host or attend a kitchen table conversation in your community? Okay. Okay.
Yes, Robin in the chat. Love it.
Literally not seeing the chat right now is tragic. I have not been looking at the chat. Sorry.
She said, damn right I will.
Oh, yes. Amazing. Okay, did everybody vote? Everybody has answered. I'm going to end the poll. We have 65 yeses. 65 yeses. We have 66 maybe. I want to talk to the maybe people. What's your deal? What can I do to make you, to sell this deal to you? And then the 11 people who said no, you know what? Thanks for coming. Thanks for being honest. Appreciate it. Love that for us. So remember, if we say that all the 66 people who said yes and all the 65 people who said maybe, each of you hosts a conversation with 7 people, that's almost 1,000 people that we have brought into the movement, have built relationship with, have skilled up, and then we are just that much stronger because each of us is I mean every person, the idea is that like if 7 of you come to the kitchen table conversation and each maybe like 2 other people from those group hosted another kitchen table conversation, we scale up our work. And so that's what we're here to do. We're fighting corporate agenda one conversation at a time, my favorite phrase. And that is amazing. Thank you so much to everybody who have said yes. And I can't wait to hear from the people who said maybe. But I hope that, but like I said, we're not throwing you in the deep end. We provide you with a kick-ass toolkit. There's an election primer that is very intelligent and full of wisdom that I didn't write. And then we will also have a training, like I said, Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. I don't know how to do other time zones. My very last question to you is, will you come to the training? If you, all the maybe people, this is where you go because I will get to chat with you. And then we will have a one-on-one, not or a multiple on one, where you can ask me questions and then tell me why you don't want to do it. And then I will convince you to do it because I'm really good at convincing people to do things I don't want to do. Ask my colleagues. Okay, I have 36 people coming to the March 6th. Oh, it's keep going up. Everybody, if you say yes, you're going to get a Zoom link. So do your thing. I am once again forgetting to look at the chat. A lot of things going on in there. My colleagues are doing their thing. I'm giving you as much time as you can. Okay, everybody has answered. We end a poll. I'm going to see 66 people, 67 on Thursday. It's going to be my best training yet. And I'm really good at training. You're going to have a great time. We're going to have a great time. And then the folks, the 30 people who said that they can't come but would like to join, don't you worry, we will record. And then someone will deliver a future training that won't be as fun as the one I deliver, but that's okay. And then, yeah, so I really appreciate everybody responding to this poll and entertaining all these obnoxious sales tactics that I've just subject you to. This is how we build a fight back. This is how we build a fight back to the corporate agenda. We know that this is possible. We know that it doesn't stop at 1 election, 2 election. We need to start building now because we don't want to be at the next election and realizing that we still don't have the power to win. We got to start somewhere. It's ideally would start a couple decades ago, but we're here and we're doing the work now. The other thing that I want to share with you is that the Council of Canadians team have a really little staff, and that we do this work. We're putting this plan to you, to the world, asking you to step up to take leadership. And I hope that you can, and or community organizing God, Marshall Gans have defined leadership as accepting responsibility for enabling others to achieve shared purpose under conditions of uncertainty. This is the condition of uncertainty, and I hope that you will step up into this leadership and accepting responsibility for enabling other people. And that start with having a couple of people who are strange or maybe not so strange to your home as the beginning of building the nuggets that will grow into what we could be the political wind that changed the political landscape to get the Canada that we want. So that is the rambly end to my thing. I just want to point attention to the chat to say that we also have a link to register to join the kitchen table conversation. If you said yes to the poll, we have your name. But if you want to make sure that like this is you really jazzed about this and you do not want to miss it, fill out the form and we will make sure to follow up with you. And then if we just pull up the slide for one. last time, I just want to share with you the last bit, which is the fight against the corporate capture never stops. And I know many of you joined the Council of Canadians because of its legacy doing work on water protection. On March 20th, which is 2 days before World Water Day, we will be hosting a webinar with Maud Barlow, asking the questions of what does the landscape of water protection means, and what in the face of tariff and trade wars, and yeah, and how do we protect water as a human right, a shared common, and not a commodity to be bought and sold for profit. And then the very last thing I want to share with you is that the slide that you've seen many times if you are a friend of the council. We are able to do this work because of you. The Council of Canadians is funded by you, people who are able to afford whatever you can offer a month over the year. 94% of our funding comes from you all. Thank you, first of all. I wouldn't be here. Many of us wouldn't be here. This movement of 4 decades wouldn't be here without you. And we don't receive money from corporations. We don't receive money from governments. So we can criticize them. But then also, we have been building and will continue to build the infrastructure of the left and the engine and the movement that will push back against corporate greed and their agenda and hold governments accountable. And we are able to do that because of the funding for that comes from you. So we're inviting you to become a member of the Council of Canadians. The cost is like $1, but obviously give more money if you have a great time at this webinar. And this is how we win, is by each of us doing what we can and then take one next step. And we appreciate you all for taking that step today, starting with joining this meeting. And then I hope that this is not the the last time I will see you in these spaces. I just want to give a quick kudos to my colleagues, Nick Barry-Shaw, Angela Giles, Dylan Penner, and Eagle Tom for making this webinar run as smoothly as it did. And that's it for us.
Thanks so much.
And
Have fun.
Thank you for
just to
organizing.
everyone,
Thank you. Thank you.
just
Bye,
to everyone
everyone.
who's sharing in the chat that they're having trouble with the primer, we will get that fixed if it's not working. Eagles on it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Have a good
We
night.
ask to change.
Good night, folks.
Thanks,
All right,
everybody.
shut it down.
Now
Thank
take
you.
action. Take action.
Thank
Stay
you.
strong, everybody.
Oh my God, see so many friendly
Go
faces.
Habs, go Habs.
Elbows up, elbows up.
No arguments.
All right, please take good care. Have a good rest of your evening.
We're gonna have to find a way to mass produce these because
We are mass producing them by
Yeah.
my hand, by my bare
Right.
hands.
So
cranking
stay
them out.
tuned. I haven't figured out the distribution.
Nick, I found 4 of them on my red banner thing, and I pulled them all out, and I have them on all of my coats now.
It's great. Yeah.
Wow.
That's old is new again. So, you know.
Yeah, everything
Boy.
old is new again. Same shit, different fight, right?
Back at it again. Thank you, folks. Really appreciate you all joining. Can whoever be the host turn this off, please?
See you all Thursday.
I will let
Be
you
well,
know.
folks.
Thank you.
I'm going to close the meeting now.
Take care.
Thanks, Eagle. Thank you.
Cheers. Cheers.